Volume 2, Chapter 10 of Rob Roy. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 10th. Far as the eye could reach, no tree was seen. Earth, clad in russet, scorned the lively green. No birds, except as birds of passage flew. No bee was heard to hum, no dove to coo. No streams, as amber smooth, as amber clear, were seen to glide, or heard to warble here. Prophecy of famine. It was in the bracing atmosphere of a harvest morning that I met by appointment Fairservice with the horses at the door of Mr. Jarvie's house, which was but little space distant from Mrs. Flyter's hotel. The first matter which caught my attention was, that whatever were the deficiencies of the pony which Mr. Fairservice's legal adviser, Clerk Toothhope, generously bestowed upon him in exchange for Thorncliff's mare, he had contrived to part with it, and procure in its stead an animal with so curious and complete a lameness, that it seemed only to make use of 3 legs for the purpose of progression, while the fourth appeared as if meant to be flourished in the air by way of accompaniment. "What do you mean by bringing such a creature as that here, sir? And where is the pony you rode to Glasgow upon?" were my very natural and impatient inquiries. "I sell't it, sir. It was a slink beast, and would hae eaten its head aff, standing at Luckie Flyter's at a livery, and I hae bought this on your honour's account. It's a grand bargain, cost but £1 sterling the foot. That's for a' thegither. The stringhold will gae off when it's gien a mile. It's a well kenned ganger, they call it Souple Tam." "On my soul, sir," said I, "you will never rest until my Supplejack and your shoulders become acquainted. If you do not go instantly and procure the other brute, you shall pay the penalty of your ingenuity." Andrew, notwithstanding my threats, continued to battle the point, as he said it would cost him a guinea of rue bargain to the man who had bought his pony, before he could get it back again. Like a true Englishman, though sensible, I was duped by the rascal. I was about to pay his exaction rather than lose time, when forth sallied Mr. Jarvie, cloaked, mantled, hooded, and booted, as if for a Siberian winter; while 2 apprentices, under the immediate direction of Mattie, led forth the decent ambling steed which had the honour on such occasions to support the person of the Glasgow magistrate. Ere he clomber to the saddle, an expression more descriptive of the Bailie's mode of mounting than that of the knights errant to whom Spenser applies it, he inquired the cause of the dispute betwixt my servant and me. Having learned the nature of honest Andrew's manoeuvre, he instantly cut short all debate, by pronouncing, that if Fairservice did not forthwith return the 3-legged palfrey, and produce the more useful quadruped which he had discarded, he would send him to prison, and immerse him in half his wages. "Mr. Osbaldistone," said he, "contracted for the service of both your horse and you. Ta brutes at ance, you unconscionable rascal! But I'se look weel after you during this journey." "It will be nonsense fining me," said Andrew doughtily, "that hasna a grey groat to pay a fine wi'. It's ill taking the breeks aff a Hieland man." "If ye hae nae purse to fine, ye hae flesh to pine," replied the Bailie, "and I will look weel to ye getting your deserts the tae way or the tither." To the commands of Mr. Jarvie, therefore, Andrew was compelled to submit, only muttering between his teeth, "Ower mony maisters, ower mony maisters, as the paddock said to the harrow, when every tooth gecher a tig." Apparently he found no difficulty in getting rid of Supple Tam, and recovering possession of his former Bucephalus, for he accomplished the exchange without being many minutes absent, nor did I hear further of his having paid any smart money for breach of bargain. We now set forward, but had not reached the top of the street in which Mr. Jarvie dwelt, when a loud hallooing and breathless call of "Stop! Stop!" was heard behind us. We stopped accordingly, and were overtaken by Mr. Jarvie's two lads, who bore two parting tokens of Mattie's care for her master. The first was conveyed in the form of a voluminous silk handkerchief, like the mainsail of one of his own West Indiamen, which Mrs. Mattie particularly desired he would put about his neck, and which, thus entreated, he added to his other integuments. The second youngster brought only a verbal charge. I thought I saw the rogue disposed to laugh as he delivered it, on the part of the housekeeper, that her master would take care of the waters. "Poh, poh, silly hussy!" answered Mr. Jarvie, but added, turning to me, "It shows a kind heart, though. It shows a kind heart in sae young a queen. Mattie's a careful lass." So speaking, he pricked the sides of his palfrey, and we left the town without further interruption. While we paced easily forward, by a road which conducted us north eastward from the town, I had an opportunity to estimate and admire the good qualities of my new friend. Although, like my father, he considered commercial transactions the most important objects of human life, he was not wedded to them so as to undervalue more general knowledge. On the contrary, with much oddity and vulgarity of manner, with a vanity which he made much more ridiculous by disguising it now and then under a thin veil of humility, and devoid as he was of all the advantages of a learned education, Mr. Jarvie's conversation showed tokens of a shrewd, observing, liberal, and, to the extent of its opportunities, a well improved mind. He was a good local antiquary, and entertained me as we passed along with an account of remarkable events which had formerly taken place in the scenes through which we passed. And as he was well acquainted with the ancient history of his district, he saw, with the prospective eye of an enlightened patriot, the buds of many of those future advantages which have only blossomed and ripened within these few years. I remarked also, and with great pleasure, that although a keen Scotchman, and abundantly zealous for the honour of his country, he was disposed to think liberally of the sister kingdom. When Andrew Fairservice, whom, by the way, the Bailie could not abide, chose to impute the accident of one of the horses casting his shoe to the deteriorating influence of the union, he incurred a severe rebuke from Mr. Jarvie. "Whisht, sir, whisht! It's ill scraped tongues like yours that make mischief atween neighbourhoods and nations. There's naething sae good on this side of time but it might hae been better, and that may be said o' the Union. Nane would keener against it than the Glasgow folk, with their rabblings and their risings and their mobs, as they call them nowadays. But it's an ill wind blaws naebody gude. Let ilka ane reese the fort as they find it. I say let Glasgow flourish, whilk is judiciously and elegantly putting round the town's arms by way of byword. No, since Saint Mungo catched herrings in the Clyde, what was ever like to gar us flourish like the sugar and tobacco trade? Will onybody tell me that, and grumble at the treaty that opened us a road west awa yonder?" Andrew Fairservice was far from acquiescing in these arguments of expedience, and even ventured to enter a grumbling protest, that it was an unco change to hae Scotland's laws made in England, and that, for his share, he wouldna for all the herring barrels in Glasgow, and all the tobacco casks to boot, hae given up the riding o' the Scots Parliament, or sent awa our crown, and our sword, and our sceptre, and Mons Meg, to be kept by the English puck puddings in the Tower of London. What would Sir William Wallace, or old Davy Lindsay, he said to the Union, or them that made it? The road which we travelled, while diverting the way with these discussions, had become wild and open as soon as we had left Glasgow a mile or two behind us, and was growing more dreary as we advanced. Huge continuous heaths spread before, behind, and around us, in hopeless barrenness, now level and interspersed with swamps, green with treacherous verdure, or sable with turf, or, as they call them in Scotland, peat bogs, and now swelling into huge heavy ascents, which wanted the dignity and form of hills, while they were still more toilsome to the passenger. There were neither trees nor bushes to relieve the eye from the russet livery of absolute sterility. The very heath was of that stinted, imperfect kind which has little or no flower, and affords the coarsest and meanest covering, which, as far as my experience enables me to judge, Mother Earth is ever arrayed in. Living thing we saw none, except occasionally a few straggling sheep of a strange diversity of colours, as black, bluish, and orange. The sable hue predominated, however, in their faces and legs. The very birds seemed to shun these wastes, and no wonder, since they had an easy method of escaping from them. At least I only heard the monotonous and plaintive cries of the lapwing and curlew, which my companions denominated the peasweep and whaup. At dinner, however, which we took about noon at a most miserable alehouse, we had the good fortune to find that these tiresome screamers of the morass were not the only inhabitants of the moors. The good wife told us that the gude man had been at the heel, and well for us that he had been so, for we enjoyed the product of his chasse in the shape of some broiled moor game, a dish which gallantly eked out the ewe milk cheese, dried salmon, and oaten bread, being all besides that the house afforded. Some very indifferent twopenny ale, and a glass of excellent brandy, crowned our repast, and as our horses had in the meantime discussed their corn, we resumed our journey with renovated vigour. I had need of all the spirits a good dinner could give, to resist the dejection which crept insensibly on my mind, when I combined the strange uncertainty of my errand with the disconsolate aspect of the country through which it was leading me. Our road continued to be, if possible, more waste and wild than we had travelled in the forenoon. The few miserable hovels that showed some marks of human habitation were now of still rarer occurrence, and at length, as we began to ascend an uninterrupted swell of the moorland, they totally disappeared. The only exercise which my imagination received was, when some particular turn of the road gave us a partial view, to the left, of a large assemblage of dark blue mountains, stretching to the north and north west, which promised to include within their recesses a country as wild perhaps, but certainly differing greatly in point of interest from that which we now travelled. The peaks of this screen of mountains were as wildly varied and distinguished as the hills which we had seen on the right were tame and lumpish; and while I gazed on this alpine region, I felt a longing to explore its recesses, though accompanied with toil and danger, similar to that which a sailor feels when he wishes for the risks and animation of a battle or a gale, in exchange for the insupportable monotony of a protracted calm. I made various inquiries of my friend Mr. Jarvie respecting the names and positions of these remarkable mountains, but it was a subject on which he had no information, or did not choose to be communicative. "They're the Hieland Hills, the Hieland Hills. You'll see and hear eneugh about them before you see Glasgow Cross again. I doun look at them. I never see them but they gar me grue. It's no for fear, but just for grief for the poor blinded half starved creatures that inhabit them. But say nae mair about it. It's ill speaking of Hieland men, say near the line. I ha kenned mony an honest man wouldna ha ventured this length without he had made his last will and testament. Mattie had ill will to see me set awa on this raid, and grat away, the silly tawpie. But it's nae more fairly to see a woman greet than to see a goose gang barefit." I next attempted to lead the discourse on the character and history of the person whom we were going to visit; but on this topic Mr. Jarvie was totally inaccessible, owing perhaps in part to the attendance of Mr. Andrew Fairservice, who chose to keep so close in our rear that his ears could not fail to catch every word which was spoken, while his tongue assumed the freedom of mingling in our conversation as often as he saw an opportunity. For this he occasionally incurred Mr. Jarvie's reproof. "Keep it back, sir, as best sets ye," said the Bailie, as Andrew pressed forward to catch the answer to some question I had asked about Campbell. "He would fain ride the fore horse, an ye wist how. That chiel's aye for being out of the cheese vat he was moulded in. Now, as for your questions, Mr. Osbaldistone, now that chiel's out of earshot, I'll just tell ye, it's free to you to speir, and it's free to me to answer or no. Good, I cannot say muckle or Rob, poor chield, ill I will not say o' him, for be that he's my cousin, we're coming near his ain country, and there may be ane of his gillies ahint every whin bush, for what I ken, and if ye'll be guided by my advice, the less ye speak about him, or where we are going, or what we are going to do, we'll be the mair likely to speed us in our errand. For it's like we may fall in with some of his unfriends. There are even over mony o' them about, and his bonnet sits even on his brow yet, for all that. But I doubt there'll be upsides wi' Rob at the last. Ere day or late day, the fox's hide finds aye the flaying knife." "I will certainly," I replied, "be entirely guided by your experience." "Right, Mr. Osbaldistone, right. But I maun speak to this gabbling skite too, for bairns and fools speak at the cross what they hear at the ingleside. Do you hear you, Andrew? What's your name? Fair service." Andrew, who at the last rebuff had fallen a good way behind, did not choose to acknowledge the summons. "Andrew, you scoundrel!" repeated Mr. Jarvie. "Here, sir, here." "Here is for the dog," said Andrew, coming up sulkily. "I'll give ye dog's wages, ye rascal, if ye dinna attend to what I say to ye. We are going into the Hielands a bit." "I judged as muckle," said Andrew. "Haud your peace, ye knave, and hear what I have to say till ye. We are going a bit into the Hielands." "You told me sae already," replied the incorrigible Andrew. "I'll break your head," said the Bailie, rising in wrath, "if you dinna hold your tongue." "A hardened tongue," replied Andrew, "makes a slabbered mouth." It was now necessary I should interfere, which I did by commanding Andrew, with an authoritative tone, to be silent at his peril. "I am silent," said Andrew. "I sall do all your lawful bidding without a nay say. My poor mother used aye to tell me, be it better, be it worse, be ruled by him that has the purse. So ye may e'en speak as lang as ye like, baith the tane and the tither o' ye for Andrew." Mr. Jarvie took the advantage of his stopping after quoting the above proverb, to give him the requisite instructions. "Now, sir, it's as muckle as your life's worth. That would be dear o' little siller, to be sure, but it is as muckle as all our lives are worth, if ye dinna mind what I say to ye. In this public whar we are going to, and whar it is like we may hae to stay a night, men of all clans and kindred, Hieland and Lowland, take up their quarters, and whilst there are mair drawn dirks than open Bibles amang them, when the usquebaugh gets uppermost, say ye neither meddle nor make, nor gie nae offence with that clavering tongue o' yours, but keep a calm sough, and let ilka cock fight his ain battle." "Muckle needs to tell me that," said Andrew contemptuously, "as if I had never seen a Hieland man before, and ken nae how to manage them. Nae man alive can cootle up Donal better than mysell. I have bought wi' them, sold wi' them, eaten with them, drucken with them." "Did ye ever fight with them?" said Mr. Jarvie. "Na, na," answered Andrew, "I took care of that. It wad ill hae set me, that I'm an artist and half a scholar to my trade, to be fighting amang a wheen kilted loons that dinna ken the name of a single herb or flower in braid scuts, let be in the Latin tongue." "Then," said Mr. Jarvie, "as ye wad keep either your tongue in your mouth, or your lugs in your head, and ye might miss them for saucy members as they are, I charge ye to say no word, good or bad, that ye can weel get by, to onybody that may be in the clachan; and ye'll specially understand that ye're nae to be bleezing and blasting about your master's name and mine, or saying that this is Mr. Bailie Nicol Jarvie of the South Market, son of the worthy Dean Nicol Jarvie, that a body has heard about, and this is Mr. Frank Osbaldistone, son of the managing partner of the great house of Osbaldistone and Tresham in the city." "Enough said," answered Andrew, "enough said. What did ye think I would be speaking about your names for? I have mony things of mair importance to speak about, I trow. It's thae very things of importance that I'm feared for, ye blethering goose. Ye maunna speak onything, good or bad, that ye can by any possibility help." "If ye dinna think me fit," replied Andrew in a huff, "to speak like ither folk, gie me my wages and my board wages, and I sall gae back to Glasgow. There's sma sorrow at our parting, as the old mare said to the broken cart." Finding Andrew's perverseness again rising to a point which threatened to occasion me inconvenience, I was under the necessity of explaining to him that he might return if he thought proper, but that in that case I would not pay him a single farthing for his past services. The argument ad crumenam, as it has been called by jocular logicians, has weight with the greater part of mankind, and Andrew was in that particular far from affecting any trick of singularity. He drew in his horns, to use the Bailie's phrase, on the instant, professed no intention whatsoever to disoblige, and a resolution to be guided by my commands, whatever they might be. Concord being thus happily restored to our small party, we continued to pursue our journey. The road, which had ascended for 6 or 7 English miles, now began to descend for about the same space, through a country which, neither in fertility nor interest, could boast any advantage over that which we had passed already, and which afforded no variety, unless when some tremendous peak of a Highland mountain appeared at a distance. We continued, however, to ride on without pause, and even when night fell and overshadowed the desolate wilds which we traversed, we were, as I understood from Mr. Jarvie, still 3 miles and a bittock distant from the place where we were to spend the night. End of Volume 2, Chapter 10. Recording by Felicity Campbell, Whanganui, New Zealand. Chapter 11 of Rob Roy. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 11th. Baron of Buccleuch, may the foul fiend drive ye, and all to pieces rive ye, for building sic a town, where there's neither horse meat, nor man's meat, nor a chair to sit down. Scottish Popular Rhymes on a Bad Inn. The night was pleasant, and the moon afforded us good light for our journey. Under her rays, the ground over which we passed assumed a more interesting appearance than during the broad daylight, which discovered the extent of its wasteness. The mingled light and shadows gave it an interest which naturally did not belong to it, and, like the effect of a veil flung over a plain woman, irritated our curiosity on a subject which had in itself nothing gratifying. The descent, however, still continued, turned, winded, left the more open heaths, and got into steeper ravines, which promised soon to lead us to the banks of some brook or river, and ultimately made good their presage. We found ourselves at length on the bank of a stream which rather resembled one of my native English rivers than those I had hitherto seen in Scotland. It was narrow, deep, still, and silent, although the imperfect light, as it gleamed on its placid waters, showed also that we were now among the lofty mountains which formed its cradle. "That's the Forth," said the Bailie, with an air of reverence which I have observed the Scotch usually pay to their distinguished rivers. The Clyde, the Tweed, the Forth, the Spey, are usually named by those who dwell on their banks with a sort of respect and pride, and I have known duels occasioned by any word of disparagement. I cannot say I have the least quarrel with this sort of harmless enthusiasm. I received my friend's communication with the importance which he seemed to think appertained to it. In fact, I was not a little pleased, after so long and dull a journey, to approach a region which promised to engage the imagination. My faithful squire Andrew did not seem to be quite of the same opinion, for he received the solemn information, "That is the Forth," with a "Ugh! An he had said that's the public house, it would have been mair to the purpose." The Forth, however, as far as the imperfect light permitted me to judge, seemed to merit the admiration of those who claimed an interest in its stream. A beautiful eminence of the most regular round shape, and clothed with copsewood of hazels, mountain ash, and dwarf oak, intermixed with a few magnificent old trees, which, rising above the underwood, exposed their forked and bared branches to the silver moonshine, seemed to protect the sources from which the river sprung. If I could trust the tale of my companion, which, while professing to disbelieve every word of it, he told under his breath, and with an air of something like intimidation, this hill, so regularly formed, so richly verdant, and garlanded with such a beautiful variety of ancient trees and thriving copsewood, was held by the neighbourhood to contain, within its unseen caverns, the palaces of the fairies, a race of airy beings, who formed an intermediate class between men and demons, and who, if not positively malignant to humanity, were yet to be avoided and feared on account of their capricious, vindictive, and irritable disposition. "They ca' them," said Mr. Jarvie in a whisper, "Daoiné, which signifies, as I understand, men of peace, meaning thereby to make their good will; and we may e'en as weel ca' them that too, Mr. Osbaldistone, for there's nae good in speaking ill of the laird within his ain bounds." But he added presently after, on seeing one or two lights which twinkled before us, "It's deceits o' Satan after a', and I fearna to say it, for we are near the manse now, and yonder are the lights in the clachan of Aberfoil." I own I was well pleased at the circumstance to which Mr. Jarvie alluded, not so much that it set his tongue at liberty, in his opinion, with all safety, to declare his real sentiments with respect to the Daoiné, or fairies, as that it promised some hours' repose to ourselves and our horses, of which, after a ride of 50 miles and upwards, both stood in some need. We crossed the infant Forth by an old fashioned stone bridge, very high and very narrow. My conductor, however, informed me that to get through this deep and important stream, and to clear all its tributary dependencies, the general pass from the Highlands to the southward lay by what was called the Fords of Frew, at all times deep and difficult of passage, and often altogether unfordable. Beneath these fords there was no pass of general resort until so far east as the bridge of Stirling, so that the river of Forth forms a defensible line between the Highlands and Lowlands of Scotland, from its source nearly to the firth, or inlet of the ocean, in which it terminates. The subsequent events which we witnessed led me to recall with attention what the shrewdness of Bailie Jarvie suggested in his proverbial expression, that "Forth bridles the wild Highlandman." about half a mile's riding after we crossed the bridge, placed us at the door of the public house where we were to pass the evening. It was a hovel rather worse than better than that in which we had dined, but its little windows were lighted up, voices were heard from within, and all intimated a prospect of food and shelter, to which we were by no means indifferent. Andrew was the first to observe that there was a peeled willow wand placed across the half open door of the little inn. He hung back and advised us not to enter. "For," said Andrew, "some of their chiefs and great men are birling at the usquebaugh inn by there, and dinna want to be disturbed; and the least we'll get, if we gang ram stam in on them, will be a broken head, to learn us better havings, if we dinna come by the length of a coul's dirk and a wame, whilk is just as likely." I looked at the Bailie, who acknowledged in a whisper that the gowk had some reason for singing ance in the year. Meanwhile a staring half-clad wench or two came out of the inn and the neighbouring cottages, on hearing the sound of our horses' feet. No one bade us welcome, nor did any one offer to take our horses from which we had alighted; and to our various inquiries, the hopeless response of "Ha, Neil Sassenach," was the only answer we could extract. The Bailie, however, found, in his experience, a way to make them speak English. "If I gie ye a bawbee," said he to an urchin of about 10 years old, with a fragment of a tattered plaid about him, "will ye understand Sassenach?" "Ay, ay, that will I," replied the brat in very decent English. "Then gang and tell your mammy, my man, there's twa Sassenach gentlemen come to speak wi' her." The landlady presently appeared, with a lighted piece of split fir blazing in her hand. The turpentine, in the species of torch which is generally dug from out of the turf bogs, makes it blaze and sparkle readily, so that it is often used in the Highlands in lieu of candles. On this occasion such a torch illuminated the wild and anxious features of a female, pale, thin, and rather above the usual size, whose soiled and ragged dress, though aided by a plaid or tartan screen, barely served the purposes of decency, and certainly not those of comfort. Her black hair, which escaped in uncombed elf locks from under her coif, as well as the strange and embarrassed look with which she regarded us, gave me the idea of a witch disturbed in the midst of her unlawful rites. She plainly refused to admit us into the house. We remonstrated anxiously, and pleaded the length of our journey, the state of our horses, and the certainty that there was not another place where we could be received nearer than Callander, which the Bailie stated to be 7 Scots miles distant. How many these may exactly amount to in English measurement, I have never been able to ascertain, but I think the double ratio may be pretty safely taken as a medium computation. The obdurate hostess treated our expostulation with contempt. "Better gang farther than fair water," she said, speaking the Scottish Lowland dialect, and being indeed a native of the Lennox district. "Her house was taken up wi' them wadna like to be intruded on wi' strangers. She didna ken who mair might be there, redcoats it might be, frae the garrison." These last words she spoke under her breath, and with very strong emphasis. "The night," she said, "was fair aboon head. A night amang the heather would colour our bloods. We might sleep in our clothes, as mony a good blade does in the scabbard. There wasna muckle flowmoss in the shore, if we took up our quarters right, and we might pit up our horses to the hill. Naebody would say naething against it." "But, my good woman," said I, while the Bailie groaned and remained undecided, "it is 6 hours since we dined, and we have not taken a morsel since. I am positively dying with hunger, and I have no taste for taking up my abode supperless among these mountains of yours. I positively must enter, and make the best apology you can to your guests, for adding a stranger or two to their number. "Andrew, you will see the horses put up." The Hecate looked at me with surprise, and then ejaculated, "A wilful man will hae his way. Them that will to Cuba, maun to Cuba. To see thy English belly gods! He has had a full meal the day already, and he'll venture life and liberty rather than he'll want a het supper. Set roasted beef and pudding on the opposite side of the pit o' toffee, and an Englishman will mak a spang at it. But I wash my hands o't. Follow me, sir," to Andrew, "and I'll show ye where to pit the beasts." I own I was somewhat dismayed at my landlady's expressions, which seemed to be ominous of some approaching danger. I did not, however, choose to shrink back after having declared my resolution, and accordingly I boldly entered the house, and, after narrowly escaping breaking my shins over a turf back and a salting tub, which stood on either side of the narrow exterior passage, I opened a crazy, half decayed door, constructed not of plank but of wicker, and, followed by the Bailie, entered into the principal apartment of this Scottish caravansary. The interior presented a view which seemed singular enough to southern eyes. The fire, fed with blazing turf and branches of dried wood, blazed merrily in the centre, but the smoke, having no means to escape but through a hole in the roof, eddied round the rafters of the cottage, and hung in sable folds at the height of about 5 feet from the floor. The space beneath was kept pretty clear by innumerable currents of air which rushed towards the fire from the broken panel of basket work which served as a door. From 2 square holes, designed as ostensible windows, through one of which was thrust a plaid, and through the other a tattered greatcoat, and, moreover, through various less distinguishable apertures in the walls of the tenement, which, being built of round stones and turf, cemented by mud, let in the atmosphere at innumerable crevices. At an old oaken table adjoining to the fire sat 3 men, guests apparently, whom it was impossible to regard with indifference. 2 were in the Highland dress, the one, a little dark complexioned man, with a lively, quick, and irritable expression of features, wore the trews, or close pantaloons, wove out of a sort of checkered stocking stuff. The Bailie whispered me, that he behoved to be a man of some consequence, for that naebody but the Duinhe wassels wore the trews. They were ill to weave exactly to the Highland pleasure. The other mountaineer was a very tall, strong man, with a quantity of reddish hair, freckled face, high cheekbones, and long chin, a sort of caricature of the national features of Scotland. The tartan which he wore differed from that of his companion, as it had much more scarlet in it, whereas the shades of black and dark green predominated in the chequers of the other. The third, who sate at the same table, was in the Lowland dress. A bold, stout-looking man, with a cast of military daring in his eye and manner, his riding dress showily and profusely laced, and his cocked hat of formidable dimensions. His hanger and a pair of pistols lay on the table before him. Each of the Highlanders had their naked dirks stuck upright in the board beside him, an emblem, I was afterwards informed, but surely a strange one, that their computation was not to be interrupted by any brawl. A mighty pewter measure, containing about an English quart of usquebaugh, a liquor nearly as strong as brandy, which the Highlanders distil from malt, and drink undiluted in excessive quantities, was placed before these worthies. A broken glass, with a wooden foot, served as a drinking cup to the whole party, and circulated with a rapidity which, considering the potency of the liquor, seemed absolutely marvellous. These men spoke loudly and eagerly together, sometimes in Gaelic, at other times in English. Another Highlander, wrapped in his plaid, reclined on the floor, his head resting on a stone, from which it was only separated by a wisp of straw, and slept, or seemed to sleep, without attending to what was going on around him. He also was probably a stranger, for he lay in full dress, and accoutred with the sword and target, the usual arms of his countrymen when on a journey. Cribs there were of different dimensions beside the walls, formed some of fractured boards, some of shattered wicker work, or plaited boughs, in which slumbered the family of the house, men, women, and children, their places of repose only concealed by the dusky wreaths of vapour which arose above, below, and around them. Our entrance was made so quietly, and the carousers I have described were so eagerly engaged in their discussions, that we escaped their notice for a minute or two. But I observed the Highlander, who lay beside the fire, raise himself on his elbow as we entered, and, drawing his plaid over the lower part of his face, fix his look on us for a few seconds, after which he resumed his recumbent posture, and seemed again to betake himself to the repose which our entrance had interrupted. We advanced to the fire, which was an agreeable spectacle after our late ride during the chillness of an autumn evening among the mountains, and first attracted the attention of the guests who had preceded us by calling for the landlady. She approached, looking doubtfully and timidly, now at us, now at the other party, and returned a hesitating and doubtful answer to our request to have something to eat. She didna ken, she said, she wasna sure there was onything in the house, and then modified her refusal with the qualification, that is, onything fit for the like of us. I assured her we were indifferent to the quality of our supper, and looking round for the means of accommodation which were not easily to be found, I arranged an old hen coop as a seat for Mr. Jarvie, and turned down a broken tub to serve for my own. Andrew Fairservice entered presently afterwards, and took a place in silence behind our backs. The natives, as I may call them, continued staring at us with an air as if confounded by our assurance, and we, at least I myself, disguised as well as we could, under an appearance of indifference, any secret anxiety we might feel concerning the mode in which we were to be received by those whose privacy we had disturbed. At length the lesser Highlander, addressing himself to me, said in very good English, and in a tone of great haughtiness, "Ye make yourself at home, sir, I see." "I usually do so," I replied, "when I come into a house of public entertainment." "And did ye na see," said the taller man, "by the white wand at the door, that gentlemans had taken up the public house on their ain business?" "I do not pretend to understand the customs of this country, but I am yet to learn," I replied, "how three persons should be entitled to exclude all other travellers from the only place of shelter and refreshment for miles round." "There's nae reason for it, gentlemen," said the Bailie; "we mean nae offence, but there's neither law nor reason for it; but as far as a stoup of good brandy would make up the quarrel, we, being peaceable folk, would be willing." "Damn your brandy, sir," said the Lowlander, adjusting his cocked hat fiercely upon his head, "we desire neither your brandy nor your company." And up he rose from his seat. His companions also arose, muttering to each other, drawing up their plaids, and snorting and snuffing the air, after the manner of their countrymen when working themselves into a passion. "I told ye what would come, gentlemen," said the landlady, "and ye would hae been told. Get away with ye out of my house, and make nae disturbance here. There's nae gentleman to be disturbed at Jeanie MacAlpine's, and she can hinder. A wheen idle English loons going about the country under cloud and night, and disturbing honest peaceable gentlemen that are drinking their drap drink at the fireside." At another time I should have thought of the old Latin adage, Dat venem corvus vixit censure Columbus. But I had not any time for classical quotation, for there was obviously a fray about to ensue, at which, feeling myself indignant at the inhospitable insolence with which I was treated, I was totally indifferent, unless on the Bailie's account, whose person and qualities were ill qualified for such an adventure. I started up, however, on seeing the others rise, and dropped my cloak from my shoulders, that I might be ready to stand on the defensive. "We are three to three," said the lesser Highlander, glancing his eyes at our party. "If ye be pretty men, draw." And, unsheathing his broadsword, he advanced on me. I put myself in a posture of defence, and aware of the superiority of my weapon, a rapier or small sword, was little afraid of the issue of the contest. The Bailie behaved with unexpected mettle. As soon as he saw the gigantic Highlander confront him with his weapon drawn, he tugged for a second or two at the hilt of his shavel, as he called it, but finding it loath to quit the sheath, to which it had long been secured by rust and disuse, he seized as a substitute on the red hot coulter of a plough, which had been employed in arranging the fire by way of a poker, and brandished it with such effect, that at the first pass he set the Highlander's plate on fire, and compelled him to keep a respectful distance till he could get it extinguished. Andrew, on the contrary, who ought to have faced the Lowland champion, had, I grieve to say it, vanished at the very commencement of the fray; but his antagonist, crying, "Fair play," seemed courteously disposed to take no share in the scuffle. Thus we commenced our rencontre on fair terms as to numbers. My own aim was to possess myself, if possible, of my antagonist's weapon, but I was deterred from closing, for fear of the dirk which he held in his left hand, and used in parrying the thrusts of my rapier. Meantime the Bailie, notwithstanding the success of his first onset, was sorely bested. The weight of his weapon, the corpulence of his person, the very effervescence of his own passions, were rapidly exhausting both his strength and his breath, and he was almost at the mercy of his antagonist, when up started the sleeping Highlander from the floor on which he reclined, with his naked sword and target in his hand, and threw himself between the discomfited magistrate and his assailant, exclaiming, "Her namesel has eaten the town bread at the Cross of Glasgow, and by her troth she'll fight for Bailie Sharvie at the Clachan of Aberfoil, tat will she e'en." And seconding his words with deeds, this unexpected auxiliary made his sword whistle about the ears of his tall countryman, who, nothing abashed, returned his blows with interest; but both being accoutred with round targets made of wood, studded with brass, and covered with leather, with which they readily parried each other's strokes, their combat was attended with much more noise and clatter than serious risk of damage. It appeared, indeed, that there was more of bravado than of serious attempt to do us any injury, for the Lowland gentleman, who, as I mentioned, had stood aside for want of an antagonist when the brawl commenced, was now pleased to act the part of moderator and peacemaker. Hold your hands, enough done, the quarrel's no mortal. The strange gentlemen have shown themselves men of honour, and get reasonable satisfaction. I'll stand on mine honour as kittle as ony man, but I hate unnecessary bloodshed." It was not, of course, my wish to protract the fray. My adversary seemed equally disposed to sheathe his sword. The Bailie, gasping for breath, might be considered as hors du combat, and our two sword and buckler men gave up their contest with as much indifference as they had entered into it. "And now," said the worthy gentleman who acted as umpire, "let us drink and gree like honest fellows. The house will hold us all. I propose that this good little gentleman, that seems sair for fiffin, as I may say, in this Hulsey, shall send for a tass of brandy, and I'll pay for another, by way of Archie law, and then we'll bowl our borbies a round about, like brethren. And fast to pay my new pony plaid, said the larger Highlander, wi' a whole bundle, and might put a kale part through. Saw ever onybody decent gentleman fight with a firebrand before? Let that be nae hindrance, said the Bailie, who had now recovered his breath, and was at once disposed to enjoy the triumph of having behaved with spirit, and avoid the necessity of again resorting to such hard and doubtful arbitrament. Gin I hae broken the head, he said, I sall find the plaister. A new plaid sall ye hae, and all the best. Your ain clan colours, man, and ye tell me where it can be sent to you, frae Glasgow. I needna name my clan. I am of a king's clan, as is weel kenned, said the Highlander. But you may tak a bit of the plaid. Fich! She smells like a singed sheep's head, and that'll learn you the set. And a gentleman that's a cousin of my ain, that carries eggs down from Glencroe, will call foot about Martinmas, and you will tell her where you bide. But, honest gentleman, next time ye fight, ony hae ony respect for your adversary, let it be with your sword, man, since ye wear one, and not with the het coulters and firebrands like a wild Indian. Conscience, replied the Bailie, every man maun do as he dow. My sword hasna seen the light since both will break, when my father that's died and gane war it, and I ken well if it was farther coming then either, for the battle was of the briefest. At any rate, it's glued to the scabbard now, beyond my power to part them, and finding that, I e'en grip it at the first thing I could make a fend wi'. I trow my fighting days is done, though I like ill to take the scorn for all that. But with the honest lad that took my quarrel on himself sae frankly, I sall bestow a gill aquavitae on him, and I should never call for another. The champion for whom he looked around was, however, no longer to be seen. He had escaped unobserved by the Bailie immediately when the brawl was ended, yet not before I had recognised in his wild features and shaggy red hair our acquaintance Dougal, the fugitive turnkey of the Glasgow jail. I communicated this observation in a whisper to the Bailie, who answered in the same tone, "Well, well, I see that him that ye ken o' said very right. There is some glimmering of common sense about that creature Dougal. I maun see and think of something will do him some good." Thus saying, he sat down, and fetching one or two deep aspirations by way of recovering his breath, called to the landlady, "I think, Luckie, now that I find there's nae hole in my wall whilk I muckle reason to doubt find the doings of your house, I wad be the better of something to put in't." The dame, who was all officiousness so soon as the storm had blown over, immediately undertook to broil something comfortable for our supper. Indeed, nothing surprised me more in the course of the whole matter than the extreme calmness with which she and her household seemed to regard the martial tumult that had taken place. The good woman was only heard to call to some of her assistants, "Steek the door, kill or be killed. Let naebody pass out till they hae paid the loan." And as for the slumberers in those lairs by the wall, which served the family for beds, they only raised their shirtless bodies to look at the fray, ejaculated "Ugh! Ugh!" in the tones suitable to their respective sex and ages, and were, I believe, fast asleep again ere our swords were well returned to their scabbards. Our landlady, however, now made a great bustle to get some victuals ready, and to my surprise very soon began to prepare for us in the frying pan a savoury mess of venison collops, which she dressed in a manner that might well satisfy hungry men, if not epicures. In the meantime the brandy was placed on the table, to which the Highlanders, however partial to their native strong waters, showed no objection, but much the contrary; and the Lowland gentlemen, after the first cup had passed round, became desirous to know our profession and the object of our journey. "We are bits of Glasgow bodies, if it please your honour," said the Bailie, with an affectation of great humility, "travelling to Stirling to get in some siller that is owing us." I was so silly as to feel a little disconcerted at the unassuming account which he chose to give of us; but I recollected my promise to be silent, and allow the Bailie to manage the matter his own way. And really, when I recollected, Will, that I had not only brought the honest man a long journey from home, which even in itself had been some inconvenience, if I were to judge from the obvious pain and reluctance with which he took his seat or arose from it, but had also put him within a hair's breadth of the loss of his life, I could hardly refuse him such a compliment. The spokesman of the other party, snuffing up his breath through his nose, repeated the words with a sort of sneer. "Your Glasgow tradesfolk hae nothing to do but to gang frae the tae end o' the west of Scotland to the other, to plague honest folks that may chance to be away ahint the hand, like me." "If our debtors were all sic honest gentlemen as I believe you to be, Garschattachin," replied the Bailie, "conscience, we might save ourselves a labour, for they would come to seek us." "Eh? What? How?" exclaimed the person whom he had addressed. "As I live by bread, not forgetting beef and brandy, it's my old friend Nicol Jarvie, the best man I ever counted down marks on a bond till a distressed gentleman. Were ye nae coming up my way? Were ye nae coming up the Andrick to Garschattachin?" "Troth no, Maister Galbraith," replied the Bailie; "I had other eggs on the spit, and I thought you wad be saying I came to look about the annual rent that's due on that bit heritable bond that's between us." "Damn the annual rent!" said the laird, with an appearance of great heartiness; "deil a word to business will you or I speak, now that ye're so near my country. To see how a tart cosy and a Joseph can disguise a man, that I sudna ken my old feel friend the Deacon." "The Bailie, if you please," resumed my companion; "but I ken what gars your mistake. The bond was granted to my father that's happy, and he was deacon, but his name was Nicol as well as mine. I dinna mind that there's been a payment of principal sum or annual rent on it in my day, and doubtless that has made the mistake." "Weel, the devil take the mistake, and all that occasioned it," replied Mr. Galbraith; "but I'm glad ye are a Bailie. Gentlemen, fill a brimmer. This is my excellent friend, Bailie Nicol Jarvie's health. I kenned him and his father these 20 years. Are ye a cleared Kelty aff? Fill another. Here's to his being soon provost, I say provost, Lord Provost Nicol Jarvie, and them that affirms there's a man walks the High Street of Glasgow that's fitter for the office, they will do well not to let me, Duncan Galbraith of Garschattachin, hear them say so, that's all." And therewith Duncan Galbraith martially cocked his hat, and placed it on one side of his head with an air of defiance. The brandy was probably the best recommendation of their complimentary toasts to the two Highlanders, who drank them without appearing anxious to comprehend their purport. They commenced a conversation with Mr. Galbraith in Gaelic, which he talked with perfect fluency, being, as I afterwards learned, a near neighbour to the Highlands. "I kenned that scant o' grace weel enough frae the very outset," said the Bailie, in a whisper to me; "but when bluid was warm, and swords were out at ony rate, who kens what way he might hae thought o' paying his debts? It will be lang ere he does it in common form; but he's an honest lad, and has a warm heart too. He doesna come often to the Cross o' Glasgow, but mony a buck and blackcock he sends us down frae the hills; and I can want my siller weel enough. My father, the deacon, had a great regard for the family of Garschattachin." Supper being now nearly ready, I looked round for Andrew Fairservice, but that trusty follower had not been seen by any one since the beginning of the rencontre. The hostess, however, said that she believed our servant had gone into the stable, and offered to light me to the place, saying that "no entreaties of the bairns o' hers could make him give any answer, and that truly she caredna to gang into the stable herself at this hour. She was a lone woman, and it was weel kenned how the brownie of Bennygask guided the gudewife at Ardnagowan, and it was I judged there was a brownie in our stable, which was just which garred me gie ower keeping an hostler." As, however, she lighted me towards the miserable hovel into which they had crammed our unlucky steeds, to regale themselves on hay, every fibre of which was as thick as an ordinary goose quill, she plainly showed me that she had another reason for drawing me aside from the company than that which her words implied. "Read that," she said, slipping a piece of paper into my hand, as we arrived at the door of the shed. "I bless God I'm rid o't. Between sodgers and Saxons, and Catharans and cattle lifters, and hership and bloodshed, an honest woman would live quieter in hell than on the Hieland line." So saying, she put the pine torch into my hand, and returned into the house. End of Volume 2, Chapter 11. Recording by Felicity Campbell, Whanganui, New Zealand. Chapter 12 of Rob Roy. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 12. Bagpipes, not lyres, the Highland hills adorn, MacLean's loud hollow and MacGregor's horn. John Cooper's reply to Allan Ramsay. I stopped in the entrance of the stable, if indeed a place be entitled to that name where horses were stowed away, along with goats, poultry, pigs, and cows, under the same roof with the mansion house, although by a degree of refinement unknown to the rest of the hamlet, and which I afterwards heard was imputed to an over pride on the part of Jeanie MacAlpine, our landlady, the apartment was accommodated with an entrance different from that used by her biped customers. By the light of my torch I deciphered the following billet, written on a wet, crumpled, and dirty piece of paper, and addressed "For the honoured hands of Mr. F. O., a Saxon young gentleman." These. The contents were as follows: "Sir, there are night hawks abroad, so that I cannot give you and my respected kinsman, B.N.J., the meeting at the Clachan of Aberfoil, whilk was my purpose. I pray you to avoid unnecessary communication with those you may find there, as it may give future trouble. The person who gives you this is faithful and may be trusted, and will guide you to a place where, God willing, I may safely give you the meeting, when I trust my kinsman and you will visit my poor house, where, in despite of my enemies, I can still promise sic cheer as an Hieland man may gie his friends, and where we will drink a solemn health to a certain D.V., and look to certain affairs whilk I hope to be your aidance in, and I rest, as is wont among gentlemen, Your servant to command, R.M.C. I was a good deal mortified at the purport of this letter, which seemed to adjourn to a more distant place and date the service which I had hoped to receive from this man Campbell. Still, however, it was some comfort to know that he continued to be in my interest, since without him I could have no hope of recovering my father's papers. I resolved therefore to obey his instructions, and observing all caution before the guests, to take the first good opportunity I could find to procure from the landlady directions how I was to obtain a meeting with this mysterious person. My next business was to seek out Andrew Fairservice, whom I called several times by name without receiving any answer, surveying the stable all round, at the same time, not without risk of setting the premises on fire, had not the quantity of wet litter and mud so greatly counterbalanced 2 or 3 bunches of straw and hay. At length my repeated cries of "Andrew Fairservice! Andrew! Fool! Ass! Where are you?" produced a doleful "Here," in a groaning tone, which might have been that of the Brownie itself. Guided by this sound, I advanced to the corner of a shed, where, ensconced in the angle of the wall, behind a barrel full of the feathers of all the fowls which had died in the cause of the public for a month past, I found the manful Andrew, and, partly by force, partly by command and exhortation, compelled him forth into the open air. The first words he spoke were, "I am an honest lad, sir." "Who the devil questions your honesty?" said I, "or what have we to do with it at present? I desire you to come and attend us at supper." "Yes," reiterated Andrew, without apparently understanding what I said to him, "I am an honest lad, whatever the Bailie may say to the contrary. I grant the world and the world's gear sits ora near my heart whiles, as it does to mony an ane. But I am an honest lad, and though I spake o' leaving ye in the moor, yet God knows it was far frae my purpose, but just like idle things folk says when they're driving a bargain, to get it as far to the ain side as they can, and I like your honour weel for sae young a lad, and I wouldna part with ye lightly." "What the deuce are you driving at now?" I replied. "Has not everything been settled again and again to your satisfaction? And are you to talk of leaving me every hour, without either rhyme or reason?" "But I was only making fashion before," replied Andrew; "but it's come on me in sair earnest now. Loose or win, I do go nae farther wi' your honour; and if ye'll take my foolish advice, ye'll bide by a broken tryst rather than gang forward yoursell. I hae a sincere regard for ye, and I'm sure ye'll be a credit to your friends if ye live to sow out your wild aits, and get some mair sense and steadiness. But I can follow ye nae farther, even if ye should founder and perish from the way for lack of guidance and counsel. To gang into Rob Roy's country is a mere tempting of Providence." "Rob Roy?" said I in some surprise; "I know no such person. What new trick is this, Andrew?" "It's hard," said Andrew, "very hard, that a man cannot be believed when he speaks heaven's truth, just because he's whiles overcome, and tells lees a little when there is necessary occasion. You needna ask wha Rob Roy is, the reiving lifter that he is. God forgive me, I hope naebody hears us. When ye hae a letter frae him in your pouch, I heard ane o' his gillies bid that old rudest jowd of a gudewife gie ye that. They thought I didna understand their gibberish; but though I cannot speak it muckle, I can get a gude guess at what I hear them say. I never thought to hae told you that, but in a fright all things come out that should be keepit in. Oh, Maister Frank, All your uncle's follies and all your cousin's pliskies were naething to this. Drink clean cap out, like Sir Hildebrand. Begin the blessed morning with brandy sops, like Squire Percy. Swagger, like Squire Thorncliffe. Run wood among the lasses, like Squire John. Gamble like Richard. Win souls to the Pope and the devil, like Rashleigh. Rive, rant, break the Sabbath, and do the Pope's bidding, like them all put together. But, merciful Providence, take care of your young blood, and gang nae near Rob Roy. Andrew's alarm was too sincere to permit me to suppose he counterfeited. I contented myself, however, with telling him that I meant to remain in the alehouse that night, and desired to have the horses well looked after. As to the rest, I charged him to observe the strictest silence upon the subject of his alarm, and he might rely upon it I would not incur any serious danger without due precaution. He followed me with a dejected air into the house, observing between his teeth, "Man should be served afore a beast. I haena had a morsel in my mouth but the rough legs of that old muircock this hale blessed day." The harmony of the company seemed to have suffered some interruption since my departure, for I found Mr. Galbraith and my friend the Bailie high in dispute. "I'll hear nae sic language," said Mr. Jarvie as I entered, "respecting the Duke of Argyle in the name of Campbell. He's a worthy, public spirited nobleman, and a credit to the country, and a friend and benefactor to the trade of Glasgow. I'll say naething against MacCallum More and the Slioch nan Diarmid," said the lesser Highlander, laughing. "I live on the wrang side of Glencroe to quarrel with Inverara." "Alach, ne'er so the Cornwall Limfords," said the bigger Highlander. "She'll speak her mind in fear of naebody. She doesna value a Cornwall mair as a cowan, and ye may tell MacCallum More that Allan Inverach said sae. It's a far cry to Lochow." Mr. Galbraith, on whom the repeated pledges which he had quaffed had produced some influence, slapped his hand on the table with great force, and said in a stern voice, "There's a bloody debt due by that family, and they will pay it one day. The banes of a loyal and gallant Graham hae long rattled in their coffin for vengeance on thae Dukes of Guile and Lords Forlorn. There never was treason in Scotland but a Cornwall was at the bottom o't, and now that the wrang side's uppermost, who but the Cornwalls for keeping down the right? But this warld winna last lang, and it will be time to sharp the Merton for shearing o' crags and thrapples. I hope to see the old rusty lass linking at a bloody hast again." "For shame, Garschattachin!" exclaimed the Bailie; "fie for shame, sir! Would you say such things before a magistrate, and bring yourself into trouble? How do you think to maintain your family, and satisfy your creditors, myself and others, if ye gang on in that wild way, which cannot but bring ye under the law, to the prejudice of all that's connected wi' ye?" "Damn my creditors!" retorted the gallant Galbraith, "and you, if ye be ane of them. I say there will be a new world soon, and we shall hae nae Cornwalls cocking their bonnets sae high, and hounding their dogs where they durna come themselves, nor protecting thieves, nor murderers and oppressors, to harry and spoil better men and mair loyal clans than themselves." The Bailie had a great mind to have continued the dispute, when the savoury vapour of the broiled venison, which our landlady now placed before us, proved so powerful a mediator, that he betook himself to his trencher with great eagerness, leaving the strangers to carry on the dispute among themselves. "And that's true," said the taller Highlander, whose name I found was Stewart, for we sudna be plagued and worried here with meetings to put down Rob Roy, if the Cormels did not gie him refuge. I was one o' 30 of my ain name, part Glen Phyllis, and part men that came down from Appin. We chased the MacGregors as you would chase ray deer, till we came into Glen Falloch's country, and the Cormels raised, and wouldna let us pursue nae farther, and sae we lost our labour. But her would give ta and a pluck to be as near Rob as she was that day. It seemed to happen, very unfortunately, that in every topic of discourse which these warlike gentlemen introduced, my friend the Bailie found some matter of offence. "Ye'll forgive me speaking my mind, sir, but ye would maybe hae given the best ball in your bonnet to hae been as far away frae Rob as ye are in it noo. Od, my het pleugh kilter would hae been naething to his claymore. She had better speak nae mair about her culter, or by God, I will gie her 800 words, and 2 handfuls of cold steel to drive them over with." And with a most inauspicious and menacing look, the mountaineer laid his hand on his dagger. "We'll hae nae quarrelling, Allan," said his shorter companion; "and if the Glasgow gentleman has ony regard for Rob Roy, he'll maybe see him in cold irons the night, and praying tricks on a tow the morn, for this country has been overlang plagued wi' him, and his race is near hand run, and it's time, Allan, we were ganging to our lads." "Hout awa, Inverashalloch," said Galbraith; "mind the old saw, man. It's a bauld moon," quoth Bennygas. "Another pint," quoth Leslie. "We'll no start for another chappin." "I hae had chappins enow," said Inverashalloch. "I'll drink my quart of usquebaugh or brandy with any honest fellow, but the deil a drop more when I hae work to do in the morning. And in my poor thinking, Garschattachin, ye had better be thinking to bring up your horsemen to the Clachan before day, that we may aye start fair." "What the deevil are ye in such a hurry for?" said Garschattachin. "Meat and mass never hindered wark, and it had been my directing. Deil a bit the may wad hae fashed ye to come down the glens to help us. The garrison and our ain horse could hae taken Rob Roy easily enough. There's the hand," he said, holding up his own, "should lay him on the green, and never ask a Hielandman o' ye all for his help." "You might let us bide still where we were then," said Inverashalloch. "I didna come 60 miles without being sent for. But an ye'll hae my opinion, I redd ye keep your mouth better steekit if ye hope to speed. Shod folk live lang, and sae may him ye ken o'. The way to catch a bird is not to fling your bannet at her. And also they gentlemen hae heard some things they sudna hae heard. And the brandy hae not been ower bold for your brain, Major Galbraith. Ye needna cock your hat and bully with me, man, for I will not bear it." "I hae said it," said Galbraith, with a solemn air of drunken gravity, "that I will quarrel no more this night, either with broadcloth or tartan. When I am off duty I'll quarrel with ye, or ony man in the Hielands or Lowlands, but not on duty. No, no. I wish we heard of these red coats. If it had been to do anything against King James, we would have seen them lang syne; but when it's to keep the peace of the country, they can lie as lound as their neighbours." As he spoke, we heard the measured footsteps of a body of infantry on the march, and an officer, followed by 2 or 3 files of soldiers, entered the apartment. He spoke in an English accent, which was very pleasant to my ears, now so long accustomed to the varying brogue of the Highland and Lowland Scotch. "You are, I suppose, Major Galbraith, of the squadron of Lennox militia?" and these are the two Highland gentlemen with whom I was appointed to meet in this place." They assented, and invited the officer to take some refreshments, which he declined. "I have been too late, gentlemen, and am desirous to make up time. I have orders to search for and arrest two persons guilty of treasonable practices." "We'll wash our hands o' that," said Inverashalloch. "I came here wi' my men to fight against the Red MacGregor that killed my cousin 7 times removed, Duncan MacCraran, in Invernenty; but I will hae nothing to do touching honest gentlemen that may be going through the country on their ain business." "Nor I neither," said Iverack. Major Galbraith took up the matter more solemnly, and premising his oration with a hiccup, spoke to the following purpose: "I shall say nothing against King George, Captain, because as it happens my commission may run in his name; but one commission being good, sir, does not make another bad, and some think that James may be just as good a name as George. There's the king that is, and there's the king that serve right be. I say an honest man may and should be loyal to them both, Captain; but I am of the Lord Lieutenant's opinion for the time, as it becomes a militia officer and a depute lieutenant; and about treason and all that, it's lost time to speak of it, least said is soonest mended." "I am sorry to see how you have been employing your time, sir," replied the English officer, as indeed the honest gentleman's reasoning had a strong relish of the liquor he had been drinking; "and I could wish, sir, it had been otherwise on an occasion of this consequence. I would recommend to you to try to sleep for an hour. Do these gentlemen belong to your party?" looking at the Bailie and me, who, engaged in eating our supper, had paid little attention to the officer on his entrance. "Travellers, sir," said Galbraith, "lawful travellers by sea and land, as the prayer book hath it." "My instructions," said the captain, taking a light to survey us closer, "are to place under arrest an elderly and a young person, and I think these gentlemen answer nearly the description." "Take care what ye say, sir," said Mr. Jarvie; "it shall not be your red coat nor your laced hat shall protect ye, if ye put any affront on me. I shall convene ye baith in an action of scandal and false imprisonment. I am a free burgess and a magistrate of Glasgow. Nicol Jarvie is my name, sae was my father's afore me. I am a Bailie, be praised for the honour, and my father was a deacon." "He was a prick eared cur," said Major Galbraith, "and fought again the King of Bothwell Brig." "He paid what he ought and what he bought, Mr. Galbraith," said the Bailie, "and was an honester man than ever steed on your shanks." "I have no time to attend to all this," said the officer. "I must positively detain you, gentlemen, unless you can produce some respectable security that you are loyal subjects." "I desire to be carried before some civil magistrate," said the Bailie, "the sheriff, or the judge of the bounds. I am not obliged to answer every red coat that speers questions at me." "Well, sir, I shall know how to manage you if you are silent. And you, sir," to me, "what may your name be?" "Francis Osbaldistone, sir." "What, a son of Sir Hildebrand Osbaldistone of Northumberland?" "No, sir," interrupted the Bailie, "a son of the great William Osbaldistone of the house of Osbaldistone in Tresham, Crane Alley, London." "I am afraid, sir," said the officer, "your name only increases the suspicions against you, and lays me under the necessity of requesting that you will give up what papers you have in charge." I observed the Highlanders look anxiously at each other when this proposal was made. I had none, I replied, to surrender. The officer commanded me to be disarmed and searched. To have resisted would have been madness. I accordingly gave up my arms, and submitted to a search, which was conducted as civilly as an operation of the kind well could. They found nothing except the note which I had received that night through the hand of the landlady. "This is different from what I expected," said the officer, "but it affords us good grounds for detaining you. Here I find you in written communication with the outlawed robber, Robert MacGregor Campbell, who has been so long the plague of this district. How do you account for that?" "Spies of Rob," said Inverashalloch, "we would serve them right to strap them up till the neist tree." "We are going to see after some gear of our own, gentlemen," said the Bailie, "that's fallen into his hands by accident. There's nae law again a man looking after his ain, I hope." "How did you come by this letter?" said the officer, addressing himself to me. I could not think of betraying the poor woman who had given it to me, and remained silent. "Do you know anything of it, fellow?" said the officer, looking at Andrew, whose jaws were chattering like a pair of castanets at the threats thrown out by the Highlander. "Oh ay, I ken a' about it. It was a Hieland loon gied the letter to that lang-tongued Jude, the guidwife there. I'll be sworn my master kenned naething about it, but he's wilfully gang up the hills and speak with Rob. And oh, sir, it would be a charity just to send a wheen coats to see him safe back to Glasgow again, whether he will or no. And he can keep Mr. Jarvie as lang as ye like. He's responsible enough for ony fine ye may lay on him, and so's my master, for that matter. For me, I'm just a poor gardener lad, and not worth your staring." "I believe," said the officer, "the best thing I can do is to send these persons to the garrison under an escort. They seem to be in immediate correspondence with the enemy, and I shall be in no way answerable for suffering them to be at liberty. Gentlemen, you will consider yourselves as my prisoners. So soon as dawn approaches, I will send you to a place of security. If you be the persons you describe yourselves, it will soon appear, and you will sustain no great inconvenience from being detained a day or two." "I can hear no remonstrances," he said, turning away from the Bailie, whose mouth was open to address him. "The service I am on gives me no time for idle discussions." Aweel, sir," said the Bailie, "ye're welcome to a tune on your ain fiddle; but see if I dinna gar ye dance till to four hours dune." An anxious consultation now took place between the officer and the Highlanders, but carried on in so low a tone that it was impossible to catch the sense. So soon as it was concluded, they all left the house. At their departure, the Bailie thus expressed himself: "Thae Hielandmen are of the Westland clans, and just as light-handed as their neighbours, an all tales be true, and yet ye see they have brought them frae the head of Argyleshire to make war with poor Rob for some old ill will that they hae at him and his surname. And there's the Grahams, and the Buchanans, and the Lennox gentry, a' mounted and in order. It's weel kenned their quarrel, and I dinna blame them. Naebody likes to lose his kye. And then there's sodgers, poor things, hired out frae the garrison at a body's bidding. Poor Rob will hae his hands full by the time the sun comes ower the hill. Well, it's wrang for a magistrate to be wishing anything again the course of justice, but deil o' me, and I would break my heart to hear that Rob had gi'en them a' their pegs." End of Volume 2, Chapter 12. Recording by Felicity Campbell, Whanganui, New Zealand.